Well, my name is Mike Moran. I'm the Director of Product Development for Healthcare IT News. And on behalf of Healthcare IT News and HIMSS Media Group, welcome to the Privacy and Security Forum. We're really happy to have you here today. We've got a full house. Close to 250 people have registered to attend from around the country, 2 from Anchorage, Alaska, 1 from Hawaii. And it's really our pleasure to welcome you here today. The forum is really an opportunity for thought leaders in the industry to present information to attendees and for you to get your questions answered on a variety of topics, whether it's risk assessment, securing mobile devices, health information exchanges. This is I don't want you to leave here feeling sort of that you didn't get your questions answered. We're going to leave plenty of time at the end of each session to ask the speakers questions. That's really one of the goals here, is to share information and hopefully provide some answers and insights into some of the issues and challenges that you're grappling with each day. I do have one change to the agenda, is that Joy Pritz, the Chief Security Officer for the ONC, she had a last-minute cancellation on Friday, and she just had there was a conflict with an ONC annual meeting, so I really do apologize for that. But in her place, we have Scott McLean, the Deputy Chief CIO of Partners Healthcare, and also his Chief Information Security Officer, Jennings Ask. They'll be doing a question and answer with Healthcare IT News editor, Mike Millard. Scott will also be making a few welcoming comments on behalf of HIMSS. In addition to thanking all of you for coming, I really want to thank our sponsors. We have 15 sponsors, and there you can see they've set up tabletops out in the other room. And without them, we wouldn't really be able to do this. So during networking breaks and our reception later on today, if you could have stopped by, talk to them, see what they have to offer, they're really a big part of this. Also, everybody who's registered at the hotel has free Wi-Fi. All you have to do is log in and put your last name in the username, and your password is your room number. And even though it will say you'll be charged a certain amount, you won't be. It won't show up on your bill. It's complimentary. So our first session is a keynote with Tim Zoph, the VP of Administration for Northwestern Memorial Healthcare in Chicago. And the title of this session is HIT Privacy Security, Where is it going and how do you get there? A top CIO's perspective. We're really happy to have Tim here today. He's one of the leading CIOs in the country, although Tim has recently given up his CIO duties to focus more on the administration. Tim serves. Through Tim's leadership, Northwestern Memorial Hospital has been awarded one of the top 100 most wired hospitals for 12 years. In December 2012, he received the Legacy Award from the Board of Trustees of the College of Healthcare Information Management Executives, or CHIME, for his decade of commitment to training over 875 emerging technology leaders as program director and faculty member of the CIO Boot Camp. Tim is a recipient of the John Gall CIO of the Year Award, co-sponsored by HIMSS and CHIME in 2003. He was named the 2008 CIO of the Year by the Executives Club of Chicago, along with the Association of Information Technology Professionals. In 2012, in the 2012 ranking of the nation's best hospitals, published by U.S. News and World Report, Northwestern Memorial ranked 12th among 18 hospitals to make the year's honor roll. So it's my pleasure to welcome Tim Zoph as our keynote speaker.
Well, thank you, Mike, and welcome everyone to the conference. I want to start really by thanking Lisa and Mike for having me here today and allowing me to kick off this conference for you. I commend you in spending an entire conference on this subject and security in healthcare. I honestly believe it is one of the issues of our time in healthcare, and actually it's successful management is key to really achieving the promise, the great promise of where we can go with technology in this industry. A couple things I would say about this is I'm going to give you today my humble perspective, if you will, as a senior executive and as a CIO, and also as someone who spent some time with Lisa and others at the national level and looking at this issue. What's really great about the opportunity to give a keynote address like this is it gives you a chance to actually stand back and take a look at what's really going on. And take a look at the data and take a look at where the industry is. And importantly, look at your own actions and what you're doing and what you're not doing enough of. So what I'm going to do today is I've divided this in a series of parts for you. I'm going to talk to you, first of all, about my perspective on where the growing threats are, and give you some data, share some facts, and then I'm going to go into a series of leadership actions, which are things we are doing, but things I believe we could be doing better, and leadership actions I believe collectively the industry should undertake. And then I'm going to go and conclude, if you will, with a little bit about what a secure future looks like. So how do we know if we're actually on the way? What I will do, as Mike said, I want to make sure I leave some time for questions. As I said, I'm not a security expert, so there are many of you in the room, so if there are questions like that, I expect those will be answered as the conference goes on. But I'm pleased to respond to anything that I've talked about today and offer further perspective for you. So let's get started. You know, in preparing this talk, one of the things I did was reflect on our recent disaster, the Superstorm Sandy. And economic damage is significant. I mean, it's been now suggested that that goes in the order of $60 billion, but more than that, if you look at the displaced business and families, many of which still remain homeless. So I looked at that, and if you go back and understand the chronology of events, that healthcare, and particularly hospitals and the communities they served, were really an important part of this overall preparedness. If you looked at New York City alone, looked at Manhattan Island, 53 healthcare institutions were in Zone A or Zone B. And with this impending storm, you would have been, you were preparing, you were at least told that you were potentially seeing water surges that could reach 8 to 11 feet in height. And as you know, institutions then had to make a choice to stay or go. And two institutions that actually sheltered in place, NYU Langone and Bellevue, ultimately ended up having to evacuate their patients. And really, it's a testament to the healthcare workers of how they had to do this, you know, of really evacuating patients with flashlights downstairs. Oftentimes, the patients that were left, particularly at NYU, were the most critical patients. So, fortunately, they got out of that episode without any real harm to those patients, but I think it's really fortunate that they did. And the big question for these institutions was at the time is, are we prepared? Can we withstand the risk? Do we stay or go in the event of a pending disaster? I believe the parallels of the Sandy event are here for us in security. That is, as these growing threats are mounting to a storm, you know, what's our ability to really maintain our vital technology infrastructure? You know, are our patients confident in our track record of being able to manage their information for them? And are we doing enough to prepare? So I'm going to come back to this question when at the end, but the parallel for me is if you think about these threats and what we're seeing in healthcare security, the warnings are there. So now it's time for us to really understand and take stock about, do we stay or do we go? So first, onto the threats. Connectedness in healthcare. Eric Topol, in his book, The Creative Destruction of Medicine, talks about medicine becoming revolutionized by the Internet of Things. That is a world of interconnected, sensor-laden devices. I do believe that's true. And behind that certainly is the growth in mobility. And I think all of you know this, but I'm going to give you some facts around this. From my perspective, the most natural device in healthcare is one that's mobile and always on. We would have used it if we had it, but we never had it. Now we do. And so what this means is, what this device and mobility enables is it allows us to have the work and the workers get ever closer to patients. And why is that important? The closer you get to patients, the more efficient you can deliver the care, the more safe it is, and the better the patient experience. So we've always wanted to do it this way, and now we're rapidly moving and converging on the patient. And the other force in mobility is what I would call the steady force of consumerism. You know, as patients now have mobile devices, they're being empowered to do a lot of things. And right behind this is going to be an empowerment to manage their health. You know, they will take charge if information's available to them, if it's readily supplied. This will be an opportunity for them to make decisions about their health. You know, we say in the business that decisions you make about your health when you're not with us are more important than the ones we make with you when you are. And so I believe mobility will finally get to the point where this information becomes connected to patients and they take ready action on what they know they ought to do. So just to give you some facts at Northwestern, really since 2009, you know, in 2009, we had 300, you know, personally connected devices. We thought that was a big deal. Today, it's 2,500. We have 10,000 workers on site. I expect the next 3 years will be one-to-one. That is, we probably have 10,000 workers connected with their own devices on our mobile networks. And you add to that, there are 15,000 people that go through our institution on any given day, family members, patients themselves. They too are connected. And they too expect that they're going to use this wireless infrastructure. And in part of my role now, we've talked about one of the transitions I've had since I've been a CIO at Northwestern for 20 years. I'm now working on building our new buildings. And everything is going to be mobile. And we'll talk about this as well, but it's going to be diagnostic equipment is mobile. Everything is going to be wireless. Everything is going to be connected. These facilities and their design are literally converging on the patient. And you add to this sensors, which I think is the other big aha. The sensor allows, particularly anything that's human attached, allows this to be a feedback loop for chronic disease. You know, back to these decisions people make when they're not with us. If we have the ability to be getting real-time information to a patient and tee it up in a way that's actionable, that causes them to make the next right decision about their health, that's where the power is in healthcare, is actually getting people the knowledge they need at the time they need it so they can make the next right decision about their health. Sensors in combination with mobility are really going to help us address this struggle we're having now with chronic disease and lifelong illness. So if you think about this, everything I've told you about where we're going with this, you know, with mobility and this greater connectedness, at the same time we are also reaching out in concentric circles because we're looking at health information exchange and so on and so forth. So this is literally an explosive time for how it is we are connecting people and things in the healthcare industry. Cybersecurity. Any fans of the Showtime series Homeland? Anybody watch Homeland? Not last week's episode, the week before. It's an episode titled Broken Hearts. And in Broken Hearts, Brody, who is soldier turned terrorist turned congressman, what a resume, huh? Isn't that a great resume? Part of that plot is he conspires with a co-conspirator terrorist, sets out to kill Vice President Walden by hacking into his pacemaker device. What he was searching for, if you saw the series, he was searching for this device in the office. This is a remote control device for pacemakers. And he got the code, he transmitted it to his co-conspirator, and lo and behold, Vice President Walden is no longer on the series. By the way, it was fun trying to get this thing to the airport this morning. But, fact or fiction, what do you think? Fact. So if you look at recent Homeland Security news, in November of this year, it's reported that, in fact, pacemakers and defibrillators are not properly secured. A hacker in Australia, a fellow named Barnaby Jack, I love that term, that name, Barnaby Jack, actually successfully hacked into a pacemaker device by then altering it in such a way that it could send an 870-volt jolt into this into this pacemaker. So this is real. And beyond that, you know, and again, these devices are important because what it does allow you to do is that there are times where, in fact, a physician remotely may need to make adjustments to this pacemaker, you know, when they're not with you. So the health benefits of this are significant. But the reality is when they're designed, no one thinks about security. You know, we're just not making them secure. We're not thinking about what if someone were to do something. The same thing is true of IV pumps. If you look at the history of IV pumps in our industry, we have, these devices are really important. We've gone to program them in a very sophisticated way because there's errors that occur if you try and program them from a human perspective. Well, guess what? These devices now are all on networks because you have to download program libraries and you can't find these things all the time. So these too are not secure. And oh, by the way, they're not secure, and now we're starting to attach them to electronic records, and they will be pre-programmed. So there will be, nurses may do verifications on these, but at some point the intelligence is going to be directly fed to these devices. And if they're not correct and they're not accurate and you can't count on them, bad things can happen. So we're heading down a path with this biomedical devices, the sophistication, the connectedness, the wiredness, but we're not doing it with the forethought of security and reliability in mind. Now, I want to go to the macro level of cybersecurity because there's a lot that's been discussed about this as well. And I do believe Leon Panetta, when he's recently quoted and said that unarmed foreign actors are targeting computer control systems that operate chemical, electricity, water plants, and those that guide transportation. Aggressors could derail passenger trains, contaminate water supply, or shut down power grids in much of the country. He said, recognizing that much of the country's critical infrastructure is in private hands, he said, quote, that the reality is that too few companies have invested even in basic cybersecurity. So kind of back to Sandy and back to where healthcare is, we are very dependent. We are both, if you will, a critical infrastructure, but we are a codependent critical infrastructure. We are very dependent on electricity, water, and other supplies. We are down to days and hours if we lose any of those. And so therefore, keeping hospitals open in a time of an emergency is really critical. Not only do we need to be there to care for people, but it actually has a huge psychological effect when one of the institutions people are counting on, you know, sort of the last lights on, are not available. So again, I worry about this because of not so much the direct threat to hospitals, I worry about it indirectly and how dependent we really are on making sure that these other critical infrastructures are there, are reliable, available to us in time of need. Okay, let's go on to the patient and consumer confidence. I think you all know that patients and families really count on us to be a trusted source of information. They really rely on the fact that we will manage their information effectively. I went through these facts, and actually, you ever find yourself sometimes looking at a number and going, this can't be right? This can't be right. I looked at the HHS data. It says since 2009, 21 million individual breach events have occurred. I looked at it twice. I called my staff. I said, tell me that this is right because I'm going to a national conference if this number's wrong. And, you know, discovered it's right. And what's disturbing about it is it's increasing by 1 million events a year and tracking and going up. And by the way, 20% of this is occurring in business associate agreements. And by the way, the area we really ought to be concerned about is small physician practices of 100 and less. Because at the same time we're not secure in the core domains of healthcare, we're carrying these domains outward and we're propagating that insecurity, if you will. And we're not only automating these physician practices because of meaningful use in high tech, we are connecting them to the health enterprise and not doing that in a secure way. So we've got this huge concentric circle leakage problem that's going on. And I don't see any trend right now for which this is going the other way. Maybe Lisa's got some data she can share with us, but I don't see the trends of this going the other way, and it's really concerning. So why, and by the way, in full transparency, in June of 2011, I had 5 laptops secured inside of a room, inside of a locked area that were stolen over a weekend. Now they were encrypted, and they were used for our home health business, but they were in the process of being upgraded, and one of our technicians had inadvertently tagged IDs and passwords to those devices. So what did we do? We declared it. So we had 4,211 patients that are part of that number. So why does this matter? Here's why it matters. Surveys of patients that have gone through a breach event, 62% of those have lost confidence in their institution. And oh, by the way, another 39% said this event in and of itself may cause them to look for another provider. So if you take those raw numbers, that means that 12 million people since 2009 have lost confidence in the healthcare system because of these events. And maybe another 8 million are looking for another provider. These numbers don't add up. We simply have to do better. This is not a course we need to be on. This is one of the most shocking pieces of data that I've looked at since I've prepared for the conference. Okay, let's go on. So with all of that, I don't mean to sober you up too much. You may have to add to the growing threats, but I really do worry about this era of expansion and sensor and interconnectedness, coupled with what we know are a growing set of cyber threats, hacker events that are on top of that, maybe directly or indirectly, and then coupled, maybe most importantly, with a growing lack of confidence in the healthcare system to manage it. So what do we do about it? I'm going to give you some leadership actions just to make some suggestions about where we go. First of all, we need to create a culture for security. I would tell you, my parallel in this is that security really has strong linkage to what we've done with safety in healthcare. If you really think about it, in 2001, when the Institute of Medicine came out with its report that said, you know what, we're killing almost 100,000 people a year in hospitals, it woke people up. It gave them a sense of urgency to address the issue. And we, not unlike other institutions, we began to look at the data. We got boards involved. We were very transparent about what was happening to us. And you know what? We realized we weren't as good as we thought we were, and actions have consequences. So what do we do about it? We started to create a culture around it that said this, that in fact it's going to be blameless, that we're going to get everybody engaged. It's now everybody's problem and everybody's goal. And guess what? We're getting real results. We now at Northwestern believe that we can solve avoidable deaths. If you look at that pattern of where we've come from, starting when we created that culture of security, it didn't happen overnight, but we're getting close. One of the things I would tell you that happens with severe avoidable events is anytime there is one in the institution, we call a senior management meeting. People stand around a table. We share the information about the patient. We share information about the family, the impact it's had to them, the conversation, the communication. We make it incredibly real. So guess what? We've learned to own this issue institutionally. We've learned to change our culture. We are safer because of it. So I would tell you that I believe information security requires the same commitment and same cycle. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think we fundamentally have to change our institutions. We have to fundamentally get better at how we share the data, and we have to have a sense of urgency about it. So what I would tell you is, why not learn from one domain? If we've done it well in one place, why can't we do it in another? We actually know how to change organizations, but it's going to take elements that cause us to act and think differently. So for me, security is one of those things. It's a team sport. It's about changing culture, and it takes a sustained commitment through time. And by the way, I think for us, because security is this ecosystem that goes beyond our four walls, we have to infuse our culture in others that work with us. So others that we share data with, others that provide technology to us. I'm having the conversations, by the way, around biomedical equipment. I want anyone who works for us to care as much as I care about this stuff, because ultimately we care about the patient. We have a responsibility, if we believe, to share those cultures beyond our walls and to engage people in a way that they understand they are not only part of the problem, but they're ultimately part of the solution. Simplifying the technology environment. You know, complexity is the enemy of many things, and especially in information technology. You know, these legacy systems that we all have, they have inadequate controls, complex interfaces, and you know what? They actually sap your ability to advance your technology, your security strategy. Agreed? So, problem with healthcare is we started too local. You know, we built all these departmental systems. We thought they'd never have to go beyond their own domain, and now we're still managing with the mess. And if you look inside of any healthcare organization, what you're going to see is a lot of duplicity, and you're going to see a lot of legacy. We got to clean it up. So here's the action item. We've got to have IT architecture that rigorously drives towards simplicity, flexibility, and cost rationalization across those three domains. We've got to get simple, more flexible, and more cost effective. Because if you layer a security model on top of something that's not in that domain, what you're going to get is something that's suboptimal or may not even work. So no sense having a strategy in an incoherent technology environment, because at some point you're not going to get there. So at NMH, this chart I have for you, sorry I don't have the X and Y, it's pretty simple. The Y-axis is just the adherence to technology standards, which by the way includes security, so as you go up. The X-axis is how pervasive the use. So you have low use, not adherence to standards. By the way, those systems are gone. If you're out on the right, you've got high use, but you've got low compliance with standards. We're going to migrate that stuff somewhere else, or we're not going to use it anymore. And by the way, I think there's a lot of institutions, when you go, there's a lot of institutions that have many systems in that lower right quadrant. I call it operating in blissful isolation. Got a lot of technology there, right? And then the upper part is we've got stuff that's high standard but low use. What we want to do is develop it. And by the way, if it's up in the right-hand corner, that's a green light. We have an IT architecture committee. It's not run by me. It's multidisciplinary, and we have mapped every system we own. We've pulsed that chart, and we have a target for every one of those systems, and we know where we're going with it. So you've got to actively manage this stuff. You've got to manage it to coherence, because healthcare is consolidating. If you're living with complexity today, it's only going to get more complex tomorrow. Go after it. Get it under control. Next, I want to talk about security structure itself. I always said if I could look at one thing, if I could go inside of a healthcare institution and look at one bit of information that would tell me whether somebody was successful or not with IT, I'd look at the governance structure. I don't care what they own. I just want to know who decides, who sponsors, what's the process around it, how are decisions made. I really believe structures matter. So for us in security, in that lower part, when we're in our own technology domain, not only do we do the center part, which is IT risk management, which I think we all know, but we don't make buy decisions on technology unless it passes the security review and meets those standards. And oh, by the way, on architecture, we eliminate stuff that doesn't meet the control standards. And in the middle of that, we have a multidisciplinary group, again, not chaired by me. I actually do have a job, but it's not chaired by me. And we put physical security, we put audit, we put legal, we put nursing in the room. And we actually look at the total risk of technology together. But what's even more important than that is you go up in the organization, I highlighted these as dark blue boxes. Most people have a compliance function in healthcare. I think the best practice is leaning towards how do you really do this in such a way that you integrate it with your enterprise risk management strategy and you bring it into governance so that the institution gets a full view of its risk. That's what's most important. And back to this notion of cultures and so on. If we're sitting on risk, it's got to go above IT, it's got to go above the security committee that you got, it's got to go all the way up to the board, and it's got to be thought about concomitantly with the rest of the risk of the organization. So I employ you on this discipline particularly, that get the structures right. Like safety, get your boards, get others engaged, build the multidisciplinary teams, have others own it. Standards-based security model. You know, we're a believer in standards, and we have adopted, you know, ITIL, COBIT. I believe there's no mystery anymore about how to run IT effectively. I mean, you can go and you can look at these models, you can look at the controls, there's policies and procedures out there, but more than just having the toolkit, it gives you a common language. When we embrace this, I could reach out and talk to me about change management, talk to me about release management, talk to me about service management. How do you do it? And all of a sudden, I'm having a conversation which both parties fully understand. And that's not only within healthcare, but it's outside of healthcare. So we learned a lot in that exercise. I believe security, I think about security in the same way. We were an early adopter and a promoter of the high trust common security framework. We use it. I know Dan and his team now, it's almost becoming, in some ways, a de facto, because the way I've read his data too, they're up to now about 62% of hospitals participating and 74% of insurers. So my perspective on this is we're better off together than we are separate. You know, we're better off embracing standards than not, because the compliance is only going to go up, you know, where the regulations are only going to increase, and we're going to have to talk to one another to figure out how to do it. So this is a case where we need more defense, because the offense is ramping up. So I think the standards serve in that manner. One thing that we've learned about our run model in IT and embracing these other standards is that we have a team-based approach to how we implement the model. You know, I've got 6 people, 6 leaders, manager leaders in IT that own pieces of the framework other than the security officer. Security officer is the quarterback, you know, and actually makes sure that the playbook and the assignments are done. But when we go about implementing it technically, we put it in the hands of people that know best. We learned that with change management and other things. It's not about an individual. It's about making sure that you can operate horizontally. And we spread those assignments and give an accountability so that, in fact, no one person, but a team actually owns the implementation of this framework. So I say on this one, let's close ranks. Let's work together. It's going to accelerate our secure future. I'm going to end with one of my leadership actions, which I call proactive leadership. And for those of you that, you know, have read the books, you know, Good to Great and Built to Last, you know, Jim Collins, when you look back, he was perplexed because these organizations he was writing about started to disappear. You know, the once formidable institutions somehow were just no longer there. You know, when he researched this, what he discovered was the decline was predictable, and that it went through 5 stages. The problem is that you really didn't have self-awareness around this till stage 3. And oh, by the way, at stage 3, sometimes the implications of where you were almost irreversible. Not a good spot to be in, right? So, as Jim Collins said here too, that what happens is in this stage 3, for some reason you get blinded by your success, your culture, and your unwillingness to see things as they are. That's where I think the parallels is with security. He went on to say, quote, "Whether you prevail or fail, endure or die, depends more on what you do to yourself than on what the world does to you." So I believe security is one of these blind spots. You know, it's a subtle erosion that saps your confidence and trust of patients, your community and brand, and it has the potential to be the fall from grace. So as leaders, I think we all need to awaken our organizations. I think we need to take the matter in our own hands and run with it before we wind up somehow wondering, how do we get here? Okay, just a couple thoughts on the secure future. And oh, by the way, you've heard from me some ominous threats and bold actions. I'm actually an optimist, okay? I honestly believe we will solve this because we have to. The reason we have to is that technology is too important to enabling the future of healthcare for us not to address our security challenges. We simply have to. The promise is too great to walk away from, and our patients are too important. So what I think this looks like when we're on our way is that, one, technology continues to be this agent of change. I think it's going to be really hard to slow it down, but it's going to be this agent of change. And you know what? We're going to become more productive, more efficient. And it's going to become more pervasive, particularly with empowering patients in order to do the right thing. And by the way, we are living in a time of magnificent discovery in medicine. So research and knowledge will continue to advance, and our understanding of both the cause and treatment of chronic disease will continue to progress, and that the United States will remain on top of the world in terms of being an innovator in health. That's what a secure future looks like to me. Secondly, that we recognize that the true customer is the patient. That is, the security practices always have the best interests of patients and family in mind, and that we are transparent with its uses, and we get to a point of a real consenting process. So my words now, and I'm going to repeat them. It's going to feel like this if patients say, nothing about me without me. In other words, it's my information. I trust you to manage it with me. I will use it to improve my health. It's my information. I trust you to manage it with me. I will use it to improve my health. And then finally, I think as an industry, in this last one, that we will recognize that this is a collective problem and that it requires all of us, everyone, to step up our game. And that the way to improve is openly share our vulnerabilities, our practices, and embrace standards. We simply can't do this alone. It's too complex. So that's what I think the secure future looks like. So I'm going to end here with a notion of back to Sandy. So when this is all done, and sort of, for me anyways, when I came and thought about this talk, and I think about the conference you all have, I think it's this issue of do we stay or go with this upcoming storm of threats and challenges that we have. You know, are we prepared and doing everything we can to mitigate these risks? Are we working effectively together? What I'd like to say, and sort of in closing, is let's all agree to stay. Let's take the right steps for our patients. Let's remain the beacon of light in our communities. Let's manage together towards a secure future. So thank you. Please don't be shy, because otherwise Lisa's going to ask me a hard question. I don't want to answer it. There's one in the back here. But I'd like to know if there's something you want to add to this or you disagree with. That would be really helpful.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Is there any particular initiative you've undertaken to drive security requirements into biomedical devices?
Well, what we have done is we have worked directly with our vendors on making sure at the device level that they're continuing to improve the security and reliability. One thing we have done, and I would suggest to you is that you run a biomedical network in your institution, or you may run many of them. Strongly recommend that you have a network manager that actually oversees any additions, any changes to the biomed network with the same rigor you would run change management inside of IT. So these biomedical networks, I mean, we have a huge one. I mean, with our telemetry monitoring, we've got one of the largest sites in the country. We don't let anybody touch that, including an outside vendor, unless they go through a change process for which the network manager that manages the biomed network approves. So what's happened, I think, for us, unfortunately, is a lot of these networks, we let outside vendors run them for us. We don't take enough ownership over the change. We don't take enough ownership of what goes on in these environments. And so I would strongly recommend that we as organizations and institutions take control of those networks, because more devices are getting attached, more things are happening, and failure of those networks is a real big deal. It's as big a deal as it is in the data networks, maybe even more so. So manage up for that change, proactively manage the network, set security standards, ask for people. One of the things we are doing with vendors, one of the last idea I'd give you is we have a very large simulation center. So one of the things we're working with GE and others is, if you want the right to put the device in our environment, we want to see it first, and we want to see it working, and we want to have our residents work on it. and we want to know that it's safe. So part of what we're doing is getting pre-involved in the testing itself and not just simply relying on what's being offered or what's in the brochure. So I hope those are a couple strategies that might resonate with you.
Yep, follow-up question on that. So as part of the broader risk landscape, have you looked at the implications of installing a patient-attached device that has vulnerabilities in it?
I haven't. We haven't gotten to that point.
Thanks.
But I think that's a great topic. Hopefully that'll come up in the conference. Other questions? Good.
First, this was very interesting, a lot of good information. You have crossed a chasm, though. You've got buy-in from the non-IT people, it sounds like, at a fairly strategic level. So which came first? You pushing their change or them adopting your change?
Great question. It was a combination of bottom-up and top-down. The top-down was embracing our boards, too. The good news for us and many of you is you'll have board members or outside organizations that come from industries that have embraced enterprise risk management and have for some time. So we were asked at the governance level to say, we want to report about risk in the institution across all the domains that you're aware of, and by the way, we want you to summarize that in terms of order of priority and risk and tell us what you're doing about it. So at the one hand, we had it coming from the top down and from governance. And then we were trying to find that audience, that right audience, to begin to aggregate and talk about security risk. So at the same time we were maturing from below, we had the governance from above, and the conversations met in the middle. I do think that part of this is just an ongoing education campaign. I always talk about it as a leader that you've got responsibility to improve the literacy of, IT literacy of your organization. So the people that we got working with us early on from other disciplines, we educated them a lot about what we were concerned about. We spent the time with them. We really enlisted their sponsorship. And I'll tell you, on issues of security, it's really helpful to have a voice other than IT to say this is a problem. A huge, I mean, it's almost a ×2 or ×3 factor to have a nurse say, I'm concerned, or a doctor say, I'm concerned, or a board member says, tell me more about this. So the more you can enlist an outside voice, sometimes we look like, gee, these guys just say they want more tools, and gee, this sounds gee whiz to me. You know, having that clear, rational voice and connecting it to the patient and connecting it to enterprise risk, I think is the avenue, like I said, about safety, for how you will really begin to step up the conversations you need to have in the organization in the context they need to be had.
Hi, I'm Dr. Fairchild. I'm a nurse from Florida. I really want to applaud your perspective in terms of the patient-centric approach that you reported on. My question is regarding the governing structures and the committees and the integration of the decision-making. Do you have any patients that serve on any of those committees? And do patients exert any portion of control or consent or ability to decide what's done with their data and how it's stored and shared?
Yeah, no, that's great. We don't, the direct answer is we don't have patients on those committees. Do I foresee a day when we do? Yes. Actually, when we get to the, not on the security side, but on the privacy side, we take a lot of input. Anytime we update forms or talk about it, are we communicating with you effectively? Do you understand what it is you're consenting to? We have a patient feedback group that we have in the organization we use for lots of things. I strongly believe, and I know organizations like Markle and others talk about this a lot, the sooner we put the patient in the center of all our strategies, the better off we're going to be. It's their information. And so we've got to have coherent strategies that engage them directly. It's the way to win back the confidence. We're simply eroding it with our institutional approach. And we've simply got to get better at how we engage patients directly in this. And I think, too, some of this is going to be technical because it's the, you heard me say, nothing about me without me. And I think patients, by the way, where healthcare is going, is I believe patients are going to be dynamically updated with their information at every point and at every encounter. And they're going to have a right to it, and it's going to be intelligent, and they're going to say, what do I do with this? So if that's where we're going, they're going to feel like they're part of the team. They're going to feel like this is as much my information as it is yours. And oh, by the way, you better be able to tell me every point that it's gone, everywhere you've transmitted it. And by the way, if you want to send it to somebody, I better be involved. So I think that's right around the corner. One, because the information's important, it's going to be important to them. But I think this notion of consumerism and patients taking hold of their own health care is going to drive new levels of accountability and transparency that we haven't seen yet. So I'm encouraging everyone to get out ahead of it. I'm going to take back your suggestion. I would like to get there. I think that's the kind of transparency that we need. I'd like patients to be involved, maybe even more than just in these privacy and consenting consultations we do. Over time, this technology is going to be incredibly important, not only to us, but to them.
Excuse me, you'll excuse maybe an inexact analogy, but if I were in the coal mining business and I had a mine accident, I would expect there to be a general outcry from the population and a review of mine safety rules and OSHA coming in. Or if I were in the transportation industry and I had a major accident, I would expect oversight and the threat of renewed regulation. Why is it that 21 million breaches, I don't know if I've got this statistic right, but why is it that that's not creating the same feedback loop with the public? And if it is, are you worried that regulation, whether from state or federal authorities, is going to preempt your ability to set your own security standards?
No, it's a great question, why the impact isn't there. I mean, you think about, I gave the Institute of Medicine analogy. I think part of the reason is that it doesn't have the impact is it's 21 million individual letters. You know? And secondly, I think we've created a culture where, a paternal culture in healthcare where we just tell people, sorry, this is kind of good enough. I don't think that's right either. So I do, I'm actually stunned by the numbers. I told you that. I looked at it when you look at it collectively. And I don't know how to create the rallying cry equivalent to what we did to patient safety or other things. What I don't want to do is find that it takes a major event, that it takes something like that in order for us to really wake this up. I'd like to think that we can be back to this notion of proactive leadership, get out ahead of this, have the dialogue, create the sense of urgency. Other industries are doing this, so maybe we need to look outside, and financial services and others are really working to manage up to this. I think, we have to figure out how to create that rallying cry, because somehow 21 million breach events since 2009 is not kind of creating the outcry. What I worry about is it's not the outcry. It's this subtle but cutting away of confidence in the industry at precisely the time we need to be building it. That's what I worry about.
So I'm just trying to work this through. Having a large capital budget, and you can set up an innovation lab, and you can challenge your vendors.
Yes.
To provide a secure, transmission within a service line. How does that scale? If a lot of the breaches are happening in facilities who don't have the, capacity to enforce that rigor, we know the business associate agreement is almost one of the only things you can hang on to with third-party enforcement. You mentioned the reason why you had 21 million, it wasn't a consolidated cry for help. And then we have patients sign away their lives with the basic privacy consent forms, which you take their rights away to enforce their voice.
It's tough.
It's not working, right?
I'm trying to be more, I am an optimist about this. We will solve this stuff. Let me tell you, I think what we are trying to do, and I will tell you honestly, I think it's one of our responsibilities as an academic institution working with vendors, is that I'd like to believe that any testing we would do with devices, anything that we put in our lab, becomes a feedback loop for the development. So I'm not just out to do this for us. I honestly believe that we're out to do it for a whole lot of people that don't have the capacity to be able to do it. And what I'm after, more often than not, and I've had senior discussions as high as they go up in GE, that part of it is I'm, using it as an exercise so that they understand that the technology they provide and the level of sophistication they provide in now is hugely context sensitive. It's no longer sufficient that you can just box the stuff and ship it off and say, here, plug it in. It's interconnected. It has very sophisticated programming capabilities. And you know what? It's intelligently attached to other things. So part of the way we're going to have to get to the point where we validate whether this stuff is safe is no longer to just put it over here and let it run. We're going to have to put it somewhere where we have real healthcare workers interact with it in the context of how they use it, because it's so complicated. And we're going to have to attach it to these biomedical networks to say, what kind of behavior does it have when I connect it to other things? So either we have to build the labs, or the vendors have to build the labs, or we have to maybe do this as an industry to build the labs so that we're adequately protecting our patients. Because we're just, my own view is I just don't feel like we're doing the job right now. And I gave you a couple of high-level examples, I think, on things that are starting to emerge on some really important pieces of technology.
One more question?
Well, if there's not, thank you. Have a great conference. Thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you, Tim.